welcome to the Spaceport Kentucky. It is exciting that we are here tonight, and I am very excited for the panel that we have. These are the all-stars of Spaceport, in my opinion, so I'm very excited. And let me go ahead and share my presentation here and get you an introduction to who we've got speaking tonight. Okay, so Spaceport Kentucky. Now, one of the things I would like to also note is that the Global Spaceport Alliance is somebody that I work with, and Lisa is here tonight with the Spacecom, and we are going to have the Spaceport Summit on January 29th. It kicks off the Commercial Space Week, which has Space Mobility Conference and Spacecom, and it is in Orlando the first week of January and February. So I hope that you can make it. And Lisa, I hate to put you on the spot. Did you want to say a few words about Spacecom?
Sure. So Spacecom, we're going into our 9th year. Our event is not affiliated with any like a membership base, but we really have squarely focused on commercial space and enabling commercial space. That's what we were founded on. That's, there's a million space shows popping up these days. But we really, our roots have always been in commercial and enabling that market. So that is our core event, and it does have an expo component as well as a conference program. And then last year, we introduced the Space Mobility Conference, which we co-produce with the Space Force, particularly Space Systems Command, so that we can get better aligned industry and government to fill the gaps in space logistics that our military needs to function properly. So that is a very, very successful event with all of the leaders from Space Force and Space Systems Command on our advisory board and coming in as speakers. And it's a really hard-hitting conversations. We have a challenge panels, we call them, and it's an interactive type of session format so that the attendees can contribute and help solve problems right then and there. So it's a very unique format. So, and we also have the GSA Spaceport Summit on Monday as well of that week, as he had mentioned. And it used to be a members only event, but now that Spaceports, we're getting to fruition a little bit. So we did want to open it up so that we could have more innovative players coming to the table and helping solve these global issues. So we hope you can join us, and I'll turn it back to you, Izzy.
Awesome. Thank you. And spaceports are where space begins. And that's why I am so passionate about spaceports, is because, nothing goes up there without them. That's where they launch from. So I believe that it can empower communities and spark education and bring an economy to an area that may not have one. So in the summit, this year's summit, we have keynote speaker Jim Bridenstine, which he was the 13th administrator of NASA, and he was also a representative of Oklahoma's 1st congressional district. So I am very excited to see him speak. When I decided to go into space as part of my career, he was in charge of NASA, and so I'm a bit of a fan. Building a spaceport. This is bringing space to your community is the fruition of about several years worth of work. I wrote a book. I created a podcast initially to have interviews for the Spaceport book that I wrote. And I am passionate about bringing it to not just Kentucky, but all over the world. There are so many different places that could benefit from a spaceport. So, but in this day and time, there's some opposition that is going on, and there's some hurdles to cross. So tonight we're going to talk about business cases for a spaceport with Arturo Machuca, and he is from Houston. And after that, we're going to be talking about the education with Dr. David Alexander. We are going to look at how to build the infrastructure from point to point. We have Spaceport America here. Scott McLaughlin, and he is going to talk about how to set up the economic impact reports that are vital to getting one started. And then we have Francis Walker, which is from Corgan, and he's going to talk about building a spaceport. So, and this is part one. There's going to be a part two, and part two is going to be focused on horizontal launch, because horizontal launch is what Kentucky can do. And there's a lot of different states and everything that are looking into spaceports that cannot do vertical launch. Vertical launch is the rockets. That's the, the Cape Canaverals. And Spaceport America is one of the, I believe, is the only one or one of the only ones that can do both. So many areas can only focus on horizontal launch. So Kentucky can only do horizontal launch when we get that started. We also have Oscar Garcia with InterFlight Global Corporation speaking on preparing for point-to-point transportation needs. Part two will be horizontal launch. We have different aircraft that we're going to be talking about. We have some guest speakers that we're lining up for that one as well. This is Dawn Aerospace is one of the speakers for part two. And also Oscar Garcia is also going to be talking about supersonic, suborbital, and hypersonic aircraft. There's a couple of others that we're waiting to hear from and get their approval. And please sign up so you don't miss those notifications. We definitely want you to know when we have another Space for Kentucky. We try to do at least every other month, if not every month. This part two is in November 30th, so we were able to do back-to-back months, but a lot of times we can only do every other month. And like I said before, this meeting, these are the things that we're going to be discussing. And let me, this is the panel that we're going to be hearing from, and these are all superstars in the spaceport community, and I am so excited. So let's start off with our first speaker. He is the director of Ellington Airport and Houston Spaceport. He is a tireless advocate of space and a dedicated leader in the aerospace and aviation community. His efforts and leadership have been crucial for the rapid growth of Houston Spaceport over the past 10 years. Under his leadership, the Houston Spaceport has become the fastest growing commercial spaceport in the country. In doing so, it has become a major economic driver, injecting millions of dollars and hundreds of jobs into the regional community. And there are two reasons that I have asked him and Dr. David Alexander to present today. And the first one is that they are a horizontal launch licensed spaceport in Kentucky, as well as maybe yours. This is the only option. And Houston Spaceport is within a city, so it has a huge population that's around it. And the second reason that I asked them to come is because they have a beautiful business case on why a spaceport can impact an area. They were able to take $21 million of airport infrastructure money and turn it into $5 billion. Now, I interviewed Arturo and Dr. Alexander for my podcast last summer. And when we did, it was only a small $4 billion. So within the last year, they've gotten another $1 billion in contracts. And so I can't wait for him to tell you more about it. Arturo,
thank you.
take it away.
First thing I wanted to say, what was it with the deal with those two guys from Houston and that smile? Those guys are thinking about doing something wrong, I believe, right? Just joking here, but thank you, Izzy, for having us here, and congratulations for all the work that you're doing for Space for Kentucky. I believe, like I said, there are many ways to move ahead with these projects, right? The Spaceports projects that at the end turn out to be just something really, really good for the community. I applaud what you're doing in Kentucky, what the state of Kentucky is doing, and I wish you all the best as you continue to work your plan. From our perspective, yeah, you were describing it. Actually, it's almost hard to believe that the tremendous progress that we have done in the past 2 years. Altogether, you were describing, yeah, today the Houston Spaceport has north of $5 billion of contracts, the work of the next 10 years, right? That includes astronaut suits, commercial space station, landers, lunar landers, etc. In addition, I was just reading a little bit about Axiom. Axiom is now funded, believe it or not, at $2.1 billion. That's what they were describing. Everybody here in Houston was so happy when they heard that, right? Another unicorn in Houston, they were saying. So again, yes, that to reaffirm that notion and that understanding that activity connected to aerospace and aviation is crucial for the communities, for the cities, the states, right, for the U.S. and we continue to push ahead. And thank you again for inviting us to be part of this program. I don't know, I have like 10 minutes, I believe, right? Something like that. I have a 3-minute video that I would love to share with you that I believe will give you a quick understanding of the progress that we've made in the past 2 years. Let me go ahead and open it up. Hopefully, if the sound doesn't come across, let me tell you, we can.
Well, and one of the things that I would like to stress is that this Houston Spaceport has happened very quickly. It's only been within 11 years that you have been doing it, which is lightning speed when it comes to developing an airport or anything like that. So now we are not having any sound, but we are getting some phenomenal pictures.
Yeah, no worries about that. Basically, what I have is just music in the background. So sorry about the technical difficulties here, but we can see that basically what we are focusing in here is the three major components, right, of our spaceport, and then of course showing sites that show what is going on here at the Houston Spaceport. That's Venus Aerospace Intuitive Machines.
And Venus Aerospace does hypersonic or supersonic,
they're
suborbital?
working on a hypersonic plane. They're already, pushing ahead with their propulsion, and their plans hopefully is in the next 18 to 24 months to be testing over the Gulf of Mexico. They're already working with FAA for their the permits.
And that's Collins, correct?
That's Collins Aerospace, Intuitive Machines. That was the grand opening of Collins Aerospace. Those many of those individuals that you see there are students that came out of the EDGE San Jacinto College Workforce Training Center, where they produce a number of technicians that are working with these companies. That is Nova C lunar lander, which in the next few weeks will be deployed in a SpaceX rocket up to the moon. If or when they land on the moon, they will become the first American spacecraft to land on the moon since Apollo 17.
And Houston has quite a bit of space that happens in it, but a lot of us have similar opportunities. It's not just, Houston has NASA, yes, but we all have NASA. We have NASA if you're within the United States. Even when you're abroad, you can access some of the education. So you house these particular entities, and you were forward thinking in developing them to be on your property. So that's the main difference that I see with it being Houston versus any other place, is that you were a long visioned in seeing that happen. So
Yes, you see, and really, the reason I wanted to project this images is because today I can tell you from I guess my humble perspective here, right? As I see it, the vision that our community and I believe our industry has had is turned into a very real development that is having an impact in the people. And the people connected to this business. It's more than you know I guess pie in the sky is a development that is helping companies thrive, succeed, that is helping people get better jobs, right? And at the end as we grow any type of industry, that's what we want, right? That is what we want. I see ourselves as uh, public servants. That's we serve the public, right? And that obligation is being fulfilled through I guess this actual development that, like I said, have had a tremendous impact. Why are we here, and why did we go this route? It was very, very simple for us back in 2015 when we became the 10th commercial spaceport in the nation with a horizontal launch license. We quickly found out that there were too few operators, commercial spaceflight operators at that time. So we decided that rather than concentrating and that activity that we don't control, right? We were going to focus in what we have some say, and that is the creation of infrastructure, the creation of a plan that would allow for commercial spaceflight to happen faster. Well, again, at one point it was seen as a big challenge. We moved ahead. You remember the first part of phase one of the spaceport included a $23 million investment to create the roadways and bring in the connectivity, the utilities, etc. And that construction ended up right as COVID was starting, right? We had an empty site with 150 acres of land. Today, you fast forward almost 3 years, and we have a good 60% of the site. So about 80 acres that are committed, about 45 acres that are built on, 500,000 square feet of new space. I mean, a tremendous amount of activity in terms of construction is 500,000 square feet of new space. We have about 1,800 new jobs, right? And the numbers that I mentioned regarding the economic impact that we have here over the next 10 years is fantastic. Now, important to highlight, it's not just federal money, because sometimes it's easy for us here in the industry to think, well, that's all NASA, that's all coming from Johnson Space. And well, yeah, part of that is right, but a lot of that also is private money that has been invested here in the spaceport. The big contracts, yes, there still are NASA, but again, it is NASA turning into that more efficient way of doing business. I was having a conversation the other day, and somebody was making that point. I said, no, NASA and the federal government, have elected to turn this into commercial activities, and they're just becoming a I guess more efficient more efficient machine by contracting these companies that we have. The level of activity that has been achieved so far, has also, of course, incentivized other, other companies. As we speak, I'm really happy to say that we have three large conversations, ongoing that will hopefully more than double what we have done so far, right? We have seen also the response from the state government, the government of the state of Texas, just this last September 1st, passed a bill 3447 that funded the space business with $350 million, $200 million going to Texas A&M for a very specific development that includes an aerospace university here in Houston, near Johnson Space Center, right? And the rest, $150 million to help out develop the spaceport and the aerospace infrastructure in Texas. Again, nothing but really great news. I think that the future, based on actions that have been taken by other leaders and the government, the future is very bright and very powerful, and we will, we will continue to do our part. And again, thank you for allowing me to share part of this, this message with the group, right?
Thank you for everything you do. And I want to stress that he said that it has created 1,800 jobs. This is one entity that has created that much impact on the area around it. So, kudos. And it just blows my mind. You said that there's a possibility that you could double. And now everybody sees why I'm so excited about Spaceports and what I think they can do for everybody. So thank you, Arturo.
Thank you.
Well, and I saw that Dr. David Alexander joined us. He is also somebody that has helped create Houston Spaceport, and he is responsible. He is the director of Rice Space Institute, and he is responsible for providing vision, direction, and leadership, managing the various institute programs, and identifying and fostering research opportunities in the facility. He also interacts with government and the space industry. He serves on the board of directors for the Houston Spaceport Development Corporation, and he currently serves on several advisory boards, including Spacecom, which we talked about earlier, and the Saskatchewan International Center for Space Architecture, and editorial boards. And I mean, his list just keeps going on and on and on. I have a link to his impressive bio on our website. And he is going to talk to us about education. And that is one of the things that I love most about Houston, is that the spaceport itself serves as a beacon for education. And, in the video, he showed us that there was students there. And so they, in addition to education, they have a very strong workforce development for the community. So Dr. David, will you take it away?
Well, yeah, and apparently the thing that's missing from my resume is I don't know how to tell time. So I apologize. For being late. And I was going to say that I just wanted to avoid having to listen to Arturo again. I just spoke to him earlier today. But
thank you.
And Izzy, thanks for what you do here. We've spoken a couple of times, and I can't speak highly enough of what Arturo is doing, and just setting an example too, and showing how it can be done around not just the state in the United States, but also around the world. We were in Ecuador together not that long ago, and we've traveled in various places. And I think that it's a kind of key thing, and we've said this before, which is that you have to play to your strengths, and we just happen to be lucky in Houston for many different reasons. When it comes to that, we can't launch a rocket, so that's, we don't look like a spaceport from the point of view of what you might draw in your blackboard or something. But I think that's one of the advantages, and how we can think a little bit differently about, and what we mean by the creation of jobs, and what we mean about the connection to education and so on. So I appreciate the opportunity to share some of this. And I don't have slides either. Actually, I was just talking to our legislative affairs person, which is why I was late. So I think the ability to engage with your governments, whether it be local, state, or federal, I think is a key aspect, because I think people have a picture of space that probably isn't accurate wherever you happen to be. Even people in Houston don't really, many of them don't know about the spaceport. And that's another aspect of education, is the outreach. And that's partly because we've been so heavily focused, and luckily so, on NASA. So we think of rockets and we think of astronauts. And we're slowly trying to change that view. I'd like to see us do more satellite stuff, and so we're working on trying to do more of that. But I think the key thing then, as I said, is to the kind of success I presume that Arturo was talking about doesn't just come from what he's done, which is very important, and his team, or even people like ourselves who are on these little different committees and so on, but it really comes from the community seeing the vision and then understanding what it takes and also contributing. So I don't know, Arturo, how much you spoke about the Ed Center. I'm sure you mentioned it, and some of the pictures are there, but that was one of the key elements of the education early on, partly because we lost a big deal. And one of the reasons we lost a big deal for a major company to come to Houston instead of going elsewhere was we had the promise of a training center, but we did not have a training center. And we came kind of close, but not close enough. And so we kind of evaluated what it was that we could do. Now, we couldn't change some things, right? We couldn't move Texas to the North Pole and do that, but we could think about how we address the education side. And so what we did immediately was we traveled around to some places, Wichita. Actually, I've never been in Wichita before. It's a great town. I love Wichita now. But we went to Wichita, Virginia, Huntsville, Florida. I missed a couple of those trips. I also managed to get them to Scotland. By the way, I'm from Scotland, if you haven't worked that out. But and we went to Scotland to visit a college who was working very heavily with an airport on the aviation side. And they taught us a lot about the kind of modular way you can do things and how you can train these people up, but then also how you do bespoke courses. So a specific company might have specific needs that don't get captured by the general education side of things. So we've learned from that, and a huge amount of credit to San Jacinto College for what they've done, and they stepped up and put their money where their vision was. And COVID kind of slowed things down, but we're starting to get back on track. And again, I don't know if any of you think, I don't know who the audience is here in terms of what they're thinking when it comes to spaceports and their involvement and on the education side, but the key element that made this, literally take off was the fact that industry was involved from we spent 18 months with industry. That included the contractors, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed, all these. And I mentioned Boeing first because I used to work at Lockheed Martin, so I'm trying to be fair. But we brought those companies in, along with the new companies, Intuitive Machines in particular. Steve Altimus, who's the CEO, was the chair of that committee. And the question wasn't, here's an educational package, will you buy it? It was, what do you need? And we spent 18 months with the leadership of San Jacinto College, working out what that meant on an educational side. What they wanted, Steve Altimus talks a lot about this as touch labor. What they wanted is people who could fix things. And that doesn't mean a degree in engineering. It doesn't mean a PhD in material science. It means you can fix things, and you can be trained to fix things, and you can be trained to fix things that need fixed in their industry. And so that led to the development of these different structures. How it was put in place was informed by these visits to these other centers around the country and elsewhere. And I think, so that was part of it. So that was a major part of it. I'm now on a committee advising the Scottish government. And they have, believe it or not, Scotland has 5 million people, and they're looking at 5 separate spaceports. Is there anybody from Scotland here? Okay. Oh, okay. I was going to say, it's absolutely, who is that? Francis, sorry, I thought you're a bit small on my screen. I thought you were somebody I recognized. It's absolutely crazy. And I don't think it's sustainable in the long term, but people think the business is there for them to make a case, and eventually it will sort itself out. So I kind of applaud that. But then the question is, what do you do with that? it's one thing to launch and maybe support a company, but it's another thing to then affect your communities. And I think that's where the education comes in. So that's been, I think, a quite success, and we're very proud of what Sanjak has done. And the other aspect of that is the companies who help make this happen also, and I think that's just what some of the pictures Arturo was showing, they also committed to hiring those students. So it wasn't, oh, we'd love this, and then they went to California and brought people from there. They took these kids who were, maybe shouldn't call them kids, but these young people coming out of high school, taking 8 weeks on this program, 8 weeks on that program, and then having an opportunity to intern at one of these companies that were right next door. And I think, I don't know, Arturo, you may have told this story already, but the young gentleman, the young man who came in and from an impoverished background, just lack of opportunity in his future, in his mind, suddenly he's helping make a lander that's going to be on the moon in the next few months. And that is a purely, I mean, the fact, not just is it inspirational from that perspective, but the fact that he now knows he can do that is a big deal. And he will go on to do great things. There's absolutely no question of that. Whereas before, he didn't think he had any opportunity. Maybe I'll get to college. Maybe I'll do this. Maybe I'll do that. But now he knows what he can do. He may go off and do something else, but he knows what he can do. And that's true for a lot of the students who've been involved in that. Now, that's the nice thing. That's all the success stories. The trouble, the difficulty in trying to do this in a larger scale when it comes to education is how you try. That's easy. It's not easy, but it's an easy get in the sense that there's a job waiting for these students, and it's not 5 years away. It's a few months away, and so on. How do you then translate that into the broader scope of university or college education? And I'm not talking about K-12 here. That's an important aspect as well, of course. But one of the things that when I sometimes talk about this, and I've had lots of arguments with Steve Altimus about this, what and people can correct me here. This is me kind of subdividing it maybe too finely, or maybe not finely enough. But I think typically when industry works with universities or colleges, they're looking for essentially 4 things. They do other things like sponsorship, and they'll come and talk to students. That's all great, no question. But they're essentially looking for workforce development, and that could be anything from the touch labor certifications to handle material for composites and so on. It could be engineers, trained engineers coming out, graduating, and they're looking for that. It could be PhD students who can come up with different ideas. So that's one thing that is workforce development is important, and the numbers go down as you go higher in the degree level or whatever. But then there's professional development opportunities. So a lot of universities provide, a lot of NASA people locally have done our MBA program here at Rice. Some have also gone to MIT and a lot of great schools around the country. And so that professional development aspect, we have one thing that we created when I first got started in my current role as the Space Institute was a professional science master's. And what that is, there's now a lot of them around the country in many different disciplines, but back then there was not that many. There's maybe 20 or 30. Now there's over 400 or 500. And there's a professional engineering master's, professional science master's. So it's a technical training, but it's not certified by the engineer, ABET certified, if you know the vernacular. It's not certified as an engineering program. What it does, it's a non-research program, master's program, that brings in, and in my case, because I was a scientist at Lockheed Martin, what I wanted to do was create scientifically literate engineers. This is why we go to space. We're going to be doing this stuff in space. But I also wanted to create engineering literate scientists. Because when at Lockheed, my joke is that we used to go in with the engineers and as scientists and tell them what we wanted to do. And once they stopped laughing, they would tell us what we could do, right? There's money limits, there's volume limits, mass limits, power limits, all those different things. So I wanted to have that kind of feel because I learned a lot from those engineers and how you think about space and so on. But then there's also the business component. And the idea is you give them management skills. Some of them do a joint MBA. And you also can do, we have a lot of data classes. It used to be purely statistical or something, but now we do data and AI as an option for them. And then the key thing for this is that we have an internship. And so what we try and do is work with our board for our companies around town and further afield, and we try and get them in an internship. And so far, it's a small program, I should point out, but there's only 2 students. I don't know where they are and what they're doing. Everyone else has gone into the space industry in one form or another. And so that's a good success. So that's an education at a school like a Rice. The big challenge comes from, so anyway, so I'm sorry. Workforce development, I get excited about this and I kind of forget what I'm going to say. Workforce development is key. Professional development is key. Recruitment is another aspect, why they come to our university like Rice, for example. Top students. Let's try and get some of them. Maybe they only want 1 or 2, maybe they want, right? They go up to A&M and they get another fantastic school in the region, and they can access several hundred students. A&M has more students currently than we've ever graduated here at Rice. We have like 4,500 undergraduates. Currently, I think A&M is 72,000. So the scale's a little bit different. But the recruitment is really key. And then the other one that we'd like to see more of is research and development. And this is the thing where I think that partnership with industry when it comes to education has to get a little bit better. Because I think what industry thinks of as a research university, and I'm not talking about applied research here directly, that's something the universities have to do. It's give me $20 million, leave me alone, come back in 5 years, and I'll tell you how many papers I've written and how many students have graduated. That's our model. We're doing all this great research, help us. Industry, especially this new industries and the startup industries, that's like, yeah, I can't do that. And I'm not, even if I could afford it, I'm not going to do that. But they need to see that there's a partnership there. And my argument has been that, you know, what a lot of these companies are just starting, they're focusing on customers. Let's get the business. Let's make sure we're going to be here 10 years, 20 years from now. My argument is if you work with the universities today, your business is going to have to change because, you know, the technology in the space world changes, you know, rapidly. So the technologies 10 years from now that your company is going to want to use are currently being developed in the universities today. So we have to find a way of partnering. So it's not just give us money and leave us alone. And it's not, we don't want your money unless you do it that way. The universities have to make some way without necessarily going to fully applied research. So the other thing I'll probably finish with this is part of this argument about how we bridge the gap between taking a high school student and having them trained in welding, all the way to a PhD in material science from Rice University, who can tell you what that material is going to be or help develop the material that's going to survive in the permanently shaded region on the moon when you go to mine water. How do you fill in that gap? And so we created this loose consortium around the spaceport. And as you know, for those of you, most of you are probably interested in space, the first thing you do is create an acronym. And so we worked on, we called it the HS Crew. HS is Houston Spaceport, and then the crew, I realized we were calling it a center, but we're not a center yet. So I think it's more likely to call it a consortium for research, education, and workforce development. And we've got the workforce development down from Sanjak. So the 2 top-tier research universities are A&M and Rice. We have University of Houston Clear Lake, so part of the University of Houston system. And they have done a huge amount of great work in applied research working with NASA. They've got a lot of different NASA projects. A lot of their students have worked with NASA colleagues. We have Texas Southern University, which is a very big aviation program, and Arturo may have mentioned, but they're going to be moving to the spaceport as well. And then, of course, Sanjak. Now, those are just the relatively local ones. Obviously, we've got UT and we've got Texas Tech and a few others. And that's where that HB 3447 bill comes in, but we maybe talk about that. I don't need to talk about that. Arturo mentioned it. So what we're trying to do in that group is what can we do that with the spaceports kind of blessing, if you like, because they see that what's been nice about what Arturo and Mario have done is they've seen the educational possibilities by having a spaceport in the region, but they need our help to try and make that work. And so what we've been trying to do is how can we work together at these different levels to do the things that we need to do to help the companies, to help our students, give them opportunities, etc., and take advantage of our different strengths. And so that's been the conversation. What we've done a couple of times, for instance, there's a great program. One of the things I think we're missing in a lot of these discussions is digital engineering. And I'm not an engineer, so I get excited about this without knowing anything about it. But the idea of space is expensive enough that you cannot just fly a prototype and see if it works. What you need to do is make sure the first thing you fly is there's a lot of testing you can do, of course, and the vibe tests and the thermal vacs and all those different things. But can you design it to be what you need it to be in advance of actually having to spend money and build stuff? And UTEP they've got this fantastic digital engineering program that University of Texas El Paso, so the other side of the state, but they have been kind of talking to us and others around the state about implementing this, and now they have an office at the Johnson Space Center, for example. So one of the things the HS crew did is we held a workshop where we let them present not just to us but to our companies, and then I also brought in companies from Canada, and it was all mostly online. We had a good audience in the room, but the internationals were online, and we had companies from Scotland everybody's thinking about digital or 3D engineering and thinking about how to optimize what you can do in the lab before you spend money needlessly. How do you fit 2 airplanes in a hangar? Can you do that? Can you move the plane in and out without bumping wings or whatever, doing any damage? That can all be done in a virtual environment, and you can train people in that virtual environment. And then if you do it properly, the physics modeling has got so good that you could, and I've got stories I can tell about some good examples. I won't waste your time with it, but they're so good now. The physics fidelity is so good that you can actually do more than you can do in like a subscale wind tunnel, for example. If you can't do the full-size wind tunnel, you put a 2/3 model, you're not getting all the physics. But you can do this in the computer, and now you can do this really. And I think that's what we're missing when it comes to space. So how do we bring that kind of education into this broader discussion? And on and on and on. I could talk, we do a lot with stuff. We've done live talk chats to the space station with students in Ecuador, Scotland, and Houston all at the same time. We've done lots of different things. I don't think you have to inspire people about space. I think it does it for itself. What we need to do is to work to get them in a position where there's opportunities, and they're in a position to take advantage of those opportunities. And that's everybody. It's not just the educators and the industry and the business folks. It's everybody understanding that this is a community thing, and all these aspects are necessary. They don't necessarily have to go at the same pace or even happen at the same time, but they're all necessary, and you should be working to make them work, even if it takes time, and even if you have to put them on hold for a while, because ultimately it does take resources, and it takes money, and there's a lot of competition for that. So I don't know if that helps. I don't know if that's what you wanted. It's kind of almost a stream of consciousness, but we're really excited. And I think the thing that makes me more enjoy it more and it's more exciting is the people. The people are really passionate about what they're trying to do, even though they know that there are resources here and there, and they have to struggle for this and that. But we really want to make it happen, and we're now seeing a change in NASA where they're really trying to. Vanessa Weiss, who's the director of Johnson Space Center, is really trying to make a difference in the community and expand what NASA can do when it comes to this new age of space. So I think we're very fortunate to be where we are. I think we're fortunate to have the people around us that we have.
Absolutely.
And I don't think we're unique. I think there are people everywhere who have the capabilities, the talent, and the passion to make this happen. And I'll finish with that. So again, thank you for the opportunity, and it's always good to see you.
Thank you so much. And education is a huge part of what a spaceport can bring to a community, and this is proof in the concept. So our next guest is Scott McLaughlin. He is the executive director of Spaceport America. And Spaceport America has been in the news lately as we've had some launches from Virgin Galactic that are happening there. They are the first purpose-built commercial spaceport that was happening in New Mexico. They did a economic impact study before they even thought about building this particular one. And an economic impact study is vital for a spaceport to happen. You need to have proof of concept before you even get going. So he is going to talk about the economic impact studies that came out that started the spaceport. And he's also going to talk about the newest one that he has had in the news lately. So take it away, Scott.
All right. Thank you. Izzy, can you hear me all right? I changed microphones.
We can.
Okay.
We can.
I'm going to share a screen real quick and do a kind of a quick Quick history on the spaceport, and then I'll get into all the economic impact. So let's see if that worked. What are you guys seeing?
We see your screen. Yes.
Okay, so just real quick. So if you want to go back to the history of the spaceport, it actually goes back to the 1990s. So here's a bunch of dates that lead to us. And actually, there are some ruminations about how it goes back to the 60s when even New Mexico was thinking of being a possible place for the Apollo capsule to return. So it actually, it's kind of a long story. 1990 was when they really started getting serious and did studies and tried to find a spot for the spaceport. And the project became kind of a project-ready spaceport, but there really wasn't a way to get it off the ground until the X Prize happened and Scale Composites won going to space twice in 2 weeks. And Richard Branson, he had actually started Virgin Galactic as a brand, I think, in the late 90s and didn't know what to do with it. And of course, he worked with Scale Composites. And at the same time, our governor went and tried to get a handshake deal. There were many states working to try and get Virgin Galactic to come to their state. And so what happened is New Mexico eventually got that. And of course, that's how we became the first purpose-built spaceport. And so we were a complete greenfield out in the middle of the desert. And we are also, I work for the state of New Mexico. So a lot of spaceports are owned and operated in different ways. There's one in Las Vegas being developed right now that will be, I think, maybe completely privately owned, whereas other ones are in counties. So we're actually we originally part of economic development. And so here's our mission. You can see we're supposed to build the spaceport and we're supposed to create job opportunities. We're supposed to do workforce in STEM. So that's our statutory mission. I do have a YouTube site. If you, I could show video, but go there and you can see some of our more recent things. We should probably show that map. Everybody, most people kind of know about that map, but many of your folks may not know about it. These are the official U.S. spaceports as licensed by the FAA. And every spaceport is very different. It's unique. Right now, if you go to a major airport in Denver or Chicago or they're kind of the same in a way. They do the same thing, right? But right now, spaceports are all unique. They all have their own pros and cons and their own market. So we compete against each other, but we kind of don't compete against each other because we're different enough that a company will probably figure out what spaceport they need to go to and go to that one. What makes us probably our unique aspect is we're located in the kind of the middle of nowhere. And like you said, we have a vertical and a horizontal launch license that is good for orbital, suborbital. We're also working on a reentry license like a few other spaceports. Here's a quick picture of that. Here's where we are in New Mexico down in this lower right. And we don't have the overlay, but if you go up here to the one up here, our 18,000 acres, which is in a dry basin in New Mexico, we only have a few houses around us, some ranches. We really don't have anybody around us close. Truth or Consequences is the closest town, 19 miles away as the crow flies. But we're also directly under restricted airspace. The only, it's approximately, I think, 6,000 square miles of restricted airspace that belong to DOD. And here's another look at our spaceport, 18,000 acres. So Virgin Galactic is up here in the runway area. We have a vertical launch area. Spin launch is down in what we call the advanced technology area. Some of this was thought about way back when, and some of it is new. And here's a quick picture of what we've been up to in the last 18 months, just lots of different things happening at the spaceport. Again, our videos have some of that. One of the things that's always fun to advertise is the Spaceport America Cup. So last year we had 1,600 students come and launch rockets. This is the picture from Las Cruces where we started out in the convention center and then eventually we launched rockets for 3.5 days and invite anybody listening to come out and watch it or be a sponsor and get involved with us. We've had a lot of students come out and do this and then they come back with their company. So getting into our budget and then the economic development, when you propose a spaceport, you have to say why and what you're going to do, right? And when you're in Houston, like Arturo or other places, you might have some greenfield, but you might also already have an airport. You might already have an industrial park. And that makes it a little easier. Some of the spaceports that are trying to come up in the world and in the country right now are brand new, completely new. There's one in Maine, there's one in Michigan. But here's what wound up to be some of our performance measures. So we have to report back to the state the number of jobs we've created, the number of aerospace events, the number of events held. And we're 65% self-funded in terms of operating expense. But Alaska is a spaceport, a very well-known spaceport's been a long time. And the state told them they needed to be 100% funded. And again, this gets back to how every spaceport's a little bit different. Every spaceport's going to have a different metric and a different level of acceptance by the policymakers, if you have investors. It makes it really hard. This isn't like a normal business model at all. Every site will have its own business model. In our economic impact, we only looked at 1 year. And this is the gotten completed in 2022. So here's just the top level matrix. We use the NMSU Center for Border Economic Development. And if every locality probably has a university or a company that does economic development studies and impact studies for that state or that region. For us, this was a good one. They're independent. They're right basically next door to us, but they operate independently. And what they came up with was that we have a total of 810 jobs to the spaceport. And they use, all these guys use a modeling of how they do that. We can count the direct jobs pretty easily. We can go and we can count direct jobs, but then figuring out what the indirect jobs are or the induced jobs are is much harder. Induced would be like how many more people work in the grocery store because of the spaceport. And indirect and direct are more related directly to what's happening at the spaceport. But the big number here is 60 million in value added. That was the money that was added to the economy, to the local economy. And they only count money that comes into the area from outside the state. And again, every spaceport will have a different way of deciding what the return on investment is. That's the hard thing, right? What is the return on investment for Alaska versus Mojave versus what Camden tried to be, what Michigan wants to be, what Maine wants to be? And I think it's a cautionary tale because if we go back, let me swing back to our numbers there. If you look at how long it took for Spaceport America to be as active as we are now, it was a long time. And we had to go back to the legislature many times and tell them to please wait a little while longer before they shut us down or sell us or otherwise get angry with us, which is kind of what happened. And I have a couple other things to show you. So here's a report that was done on the Michigan spaceport. I think probably people are aware that Michigan's been looking at launching vertical rockets. There'll be a polar orbit. This report that was done, similar to what we had early done, trying to figure out what the economic impact would be, said that they would have the same economic impact as 2 fast food restaurants. So that turned out not to be very impressive. And I'm not sure where Michigan is in trying to get their spaceport built, but this is a pretty, I don't know if you can see the words on here, but this is a pretty good, they did a pretty reasonable study looking at point to point and vertical. And so it's interesting because if you oversell, you're going to get the policymakers or your neighbors or folks pretty mad at you. So here's our economic impact again. And Charlie, who's on, he's our PIO, or I can send that out to people. And let me show you one more thing. Here's a similar thing that Camden did. So they did their own little economic impact, and we're trying to show what their jobs would be and what their impact would be to the area. One of the things we found is if you're not credible when you produce these things, you can't sell it. And so that's one of the reasons we went to New Mexico State University and asked their folks to do it. But if you have to really, but it's really hard, right? If you go back just 14, 15 years ago, nobody thought that SpaceX was going to be reusing boosters. I think they're up to the 14th or 15th time that they reused a booster. And nobody even thought that was possible 15 years ago, right? So trying to predict a very volatile and innovative market like Spaceport America, I mean, like aerospace and going to space is really hard. So getting back to I think that was probably the last slide. Yeah. So I don't know what to say other than every spaceport will have to figure out what its competitive advantages are, You don't want to try and create something that will fail because some other spaceport can do it better or cheaper. There's a lot of volatility right now in the vertical launch market because SpaceX has brought the price down so low, even though just a couple of years ago we had something like 140 vertical launch providers all trying to develop their own system. I think that's been quickly consolidated down, and we're going to see more and more just kind of disappear. So your business model has to be sound for today, but also 10 years out. And how do you do that with technology that is changing and evolving as fast as we can? I think I normally have a slide in here I don't have this time, but like you've said, Izzy, if you look at how fast the space economy is growing, though, and if you consider, I think there's 4 or 5 space stations being developed right now, private, semi-private space station in America, just in the United States. How all that cargo's got to get to space somehow, right? They're going to need fresh water and food and solar panels and girders and things. And so I think as a spaceport, we're all thinking that, if you go fast forward 20, 30, 40 years, we're a network of spaceports, kind of like airports, and everything's safe enough. It can land and launch in Houston or Spaceport America or Colorado. For a while, though, it's not going to be that safe. It's not going to be considered that safe, but they're still going to need to get that hardware up there. So I'm of course an advocate for spaceports, but I would say that overall it's kind of a cautionary tale trying to balance all these things I just talked about. What you can compete with other spaceports for, what your local policymakers will do, and whether you have the weather for it, you have the infrastructure for it. David talked about the workforce for it. If you can't get companies to come to your area because they don't see a workforce that's capable of doing what you kind of want to do, then you've got to go one step back and develop that part of it too. So anyway, I'll quit talking and quit sharing, and I'm happy to have answer any questions if you'd like.
Yes, anybody have 1 or 2 questions? I know that we have Granada, Killa Marie. She would like to get a copy of this, so we will have them on the website linked to Spaceport America, and so that you can actually see the report itself and what is involved in developing a report. And I would like to say, to Scott, in everybody, that it's about a partnership. And you have to develop that partnership with the universities, the commercial entities, and again, it's cautionary because some don't work out. And just like business, some don't work out. So you have to make sure that the business model is there. So any questions? And
no questions. A quick comment,
Yes.
Izzy, Scott.
Yes.
As usual, your presentation is superb, and the parallels and comparisons with other spaceports shows that economic impacts are both an art and a science. But I'd like to bring a little bit of perspective here. If you look at how aviation started, and the first aerodromes were vehicles operated for sightseeing or quick rides for people to see how the world looks for flying. You go to the 30s, every 20 years post that stage, there was an inflection point. Propeller airplanes, 20 years later, turbo propeller airplanes, 20 years later, jet aircraft. So my comment to the group is that leaders that can support spaceports need to have a 100-year vision in increments of 20 years. If we can make aviation a parallel, spaceport development and the spaceport commerce is not going to be a quick political capital gain agenda. It has to be a structural perspective, strategic, 50 or more years down the line, and then all the unknowns and all the challenges will seem manageable. I like using aviation as an example. It took 80 years for aviation to yield a New York John F. Kennedy, a Chicago O'Hare, a Miami International, or an LAX. So that's my comment there. Let's keep on tracking.
Izzy,
okay, and yes.
I'll just say one more thing that parallels with Oscar is that the spaceports, there is an interagency working group at FAA that is trying to come up with a little bit of the strategy on the spaceports, but it doesn't appear that they're really looking at it as holistically as we would like in the terms of what the nation needs for commerce and for defense. And so all of us out here trying to build our spaceport, we can't do it and we shouldn't do it in isolation. Like Oscar says, we need to work together to convince the policymakers that, for example, the Space Force has announced they're trying to get money into Vandenberg and Cape Canaveral. And the answer was, well, when there's too many launches there, they want to work with their international partners and launch outside the United States. That doesn't make any sense, I don't think, to anybody on this call, right? What they should be doing is putting money into innovative technology so they can do vertical launches from Spaceport America or develop horizontal launch vehicles that can go out of Houston or Kentucky or something, but they're not doing that. So it requires us to poke the policymakers and show some imagination about, hey, let's not give our money away, outside of the country. So we do need to work together. And so thanks for having us. And that's all I'll say. Thank you.
Well, and one of the points I'd like to make is that for a general aviation airport, it took 20 years for us to build it in Kentucky. So, Francis, are you still here? I saw a message come across and I'm not sure what it said, but
I'm here.
He is coming from the UK, and it is a lot later there than it is here. So he is going to talk about what is involved in planning and building an airport. He is an architect that has built quite a few different airports, and he is amazing in what he does. So he is from Corgan and is responsible for, he's the director of aviation studio in London. So thank you so much for joining us at this late hour there in London.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I haven't turned into a pumpkin, so we should be okay. Can you guys hear me and see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Oh, wow. Okay. Izzy, thank you for having me on the panel. I mean, it's been a real pleasure to listen to everyone talk, and it's the granularity that you guys have within the vision for space is something that I really try to tune into. And Oscar, what you had to say about aviation and the evolution of airports was essentially like a fantastic intro to this presentation. What I've been doing is I'm an architect and science fiction fan and big space nerd like everyone else on the call. And what I've been thinking about the last few years is about the what happens next, is about how disruptive ways of living and technologies can maybe influence a different way of organizing space and organizing the communities that we live in. And it's been really interesting to think about that in the context of spaceports and the impact it can have. As a kind of a starting point, I wanted to sort of throw up something just to give you a sense that I've got a wee bit of an idea of what I'm talking about. This would be sort of what I would call kind of a generic spaceport master plan. It has all the bits and pieces. It has the standoffs. It has the launch. It has the land, sea, and air connectivity, and it has processing things. But I think, like a lot of airports in the way they developed it, it's a series of boxes that have functions, and there's maybe a lack of a unifying vision around that, but all the bits are there. And I think what we want to do is take the components and then start testing it against some of the things that we're seeing, with people's lifestyles, and particularly with education and the opportunities in space. And then the other thing that's really interesting to me as an architect is our cities, the places that we live in. This is London, where I live, which has, some truly magnificent parts, but it sprawls. It's congested. It has all the issues of large cities, and it's kind of at an interesting point now where the way people want to live, especially post-COVID and technology-enabled lifestyles, and the things that people are looking for in terms of well-being and connection to nature, are maybe starting to drive potentially a different urban or community model than we've become accustomed to. The other thing about cities is that they evolve around trade and transport, right? So whether it's seaports or London with the Thames, or the automobile that really drove the growth of the US cities, are those going to be the relevant things moving ahead in this century for the generation that are coming through? So, I mean, again, I have the utmost respect for the on the ground stuff that you guys are trying to resolve, but I find it very interesting that when you talk and you the things, I think you're aware of what could this be? What's the vision that comes next? What's the thing that might pull this together? And other things that are really interesting are just the way we're connected digitally, and the way we're connected digitally is becoming quite remarkable. You know, watch my children communicate with friends in Asia, US, and these sort of collaborative online games. And what I'm seeing is, okay, they spend time playing video games, but the bigger thing is the way they communicate and the way they sort of play games by consensus, and they have a sort of social component, and they're very comfortable with it. It's quite remarkable. And then new types of modalities like the Hyperloop, like VR, we're very interested in air mobility, and how that can change the way we view physical connectivity. And the big thing about space is ultimately we're sending humans up, and humans in space need the same thing that humans on Earth need, but just with a significantly higher factor and a higher degree of precision and a much greater degree of efficiency. And I think what's interesting about that is, as a result, any endeavor that people do, whether it's in the arts or the sciences, and I don't really like those distinctions, but it exists as a convenient term, we need in space. So I don't really think there are any career paths that don't have options or can contribute to space. And just some energy creation, food, space medicine, robotics. You guys know all this stuff better than I do. These are just some examples of the kinds of things that we're going to need in space, and where we want to direct our talent. Right, the Silicon Valley in the 60s attracted all that talent and gave us the kind of the life that we have today. Bunch of talent went to Wall Street in the 80s and gave us the financial crisis. But you know, if we can steer them to space, I think we can create a very bright future. They also need to be entertained, and education is a huge part of it. So again, following up on what a couple of you said, particularly what David said about the relationship between industry and education, what we've been playing with as a model is the idea of you know, vertically stacking education, research and development, prototyping, testing, business case, manufacturing, release to market, and then horizontally agriculture, medicine, robotics, entertainment, art, culture, lifestyle, well-being, all of this stuff. What if we bring it together? What if we move away from the urban models that we have, where a certain set of activities happens over here and another set happens over here, and they're kind of siloed? Do we want to imagine a place that is focused on space, but is mixed and mingled and done in a sort of new way, and leveraging the digital connectivity and the physical connectivity that's becoming that's emerging in this century? And again, to borrow from aviation, hub and spoke is sort of the aviation model for big hubs serving smaller regional spoke airports. And I think you know, to David's point, not all spaceports won't do the same thing. Some will have horizontal launch, some will have vertical, some won't have launch, but they will be part of clusters that will probably and should organize themselves around a hub that is a place where a lot of these things will come together. And that becomes very interesting in terms of manufacturing and the way we are going to build the components for space in the future, because it's I don't think it's going to be like the 20th century manufacturing of big car plants, big factories, big industry. I think it's going to be smaller, high precision components that are made in one, maybe 3 or 4 different clusters, come together, get assembled, and then go up to the space stations. So that starts to give you a very different idea of the scale of things and the way people have to live in the size of spaces that they work in and the way we can think about it. So this was one we did for Arizona, and this is very much in the hub model. But what you can see here is sort of zoomed off to the left, but we developed an idea of sort of like the layers of an onion, how you would grow a spaceport over time in such a way that it still always had that concentration, but you added to it like layers. And then that means that you can grow. It's always got an identity. It's always got a center of gravity, and it's always got a very strong relationship to its launch capabilities. So what you can see here is that over time we've added vertical and horizontal launch, and we were getting a bit courageous with our standoffs and things like that. But this was very much about looking down the road at a point in time which you know, the standoffs and the safety factors become more manageable, become more controllable, and that you've also got a very wide variety of aircraft maybe doing hypersonic travel. So the world is a very, very connected, interwoven place, and then things come in and then go up to space. So I think this is sort of an example of the vision of what the hub might be like. And then we started working on prototypes looking beyond this that were maybe I'm trying to get my PowerPoint to move. Come on, PowerPoint. Right. So what we started looking at was if you have these places where you can bring talent to it and they have a very wide range of overlapping and cross-pollinating disciplines, interwoven with the industry side of it and bringing products to launch. As David mentioned, the 3D engineering and getting things so that your cost from idea to product is optimized and you're not spending all the time on building expensive prototypes, but you're using technology to streamline that effort. Everything, like computers, right? Everything sort of starts to get more focused and compressed. And one of the things that starts to emerge is maybe an iconic language for space communities, for spaceports that have that air connectivity. They have the facilities. They have almost like a campus town kind of feel to it, but they start to have their own identity as well. And I think this is something for me as an architect that is that I'm quite passionate about is what's the icon, what's the legacy, what's the visual memory that people are going to have of spaceports. And I think this is a big part of community engagement as well, is creating the vision and then getting people excited. I agree, you can get anyone excited about space, but can you get them excited about their part in space, and can their life be enhanced through that, and not just relying on the fact that, hey, it's space, so it doesn't matter that you're in a concrete box, it's space. But could we make these fantastic communities with green spaces and with a lot of overlapping activities, and make it very compelling place for people to want to go? Because one thing that you're going to have as spaceports take root and grow is you're going to have competition, right? So how do you attract the best talent? And so this is something that we are thinking about as attractive places that have leisure and amenities, they have research and development, they have all these things, and this is where someone wants to go and work. In the same way that someone will want to go to London to work. You know, they'll say, I want to go to London, now what am I going to do? Or they'll want to go to New York, or they'll want to go to Kentucky, they want to go to Houston. These are the things that are going to start to make the difference in the market as it becomes more competitive. And so we have a lot of fun as architects imagining this vision and how this can express itself. And we started to look at the kind of community and kind of bringing nature in. And what you'll see is these are boutique microcities that are not defined by automobiles. So they're walkable cities. They're cities where you can get out into nature. There's no suburban sprawl, but they're cities that are very contains not the right word, but they're very concise. And you can get out and you can get away from them and you can be in nature. So there's a almost a binary relationship between urban living and being out in the wilds, and I think that's quite compelling as well. So lots of nice imagery. We had some fun taking it into different locations. So 2/3 of the planet is water, and this is our James Bond villain's lair version. But one of the things that we looked at in this was the addition of a resort idea. So the previous one could be research and development. Maybe this one is resort. Maybe it's more about leisure. Maybe it's more about we were working with Leviathan down in Ecuador as well, and we were talking about the time that someone spends before launch for tourism, for example, and making that a very important aspect of leaving the planet, that you get to really connect with where you are before you leave. So this was sort of part of this idea. And again, we like to make the plans and look how it could work as a functioning thing. And then you've got your launch sites off in the water. So somewhere between architecture and sci-fi, this stuff. We had a lot of fun doing it, but it's kind of a stacked city with that's multifunctional. And I'll kind of scoot through these. I'm happy to share these slides. Then we looked at the desert, which is probably quite similar for certainly for Arizona. This is stuff that we were looking at in the Middle East. But again, it's about adapting the spaceports to location, and to that point of everyone being different. I think that there's a sense, and airports do this, where there's a sort of generic quality to it. A lot of the airports that we work on today, they're trying to recapture the sense of place, and they're trying to recapture that sense of gateway to specific locations. So I kind of see these as almost having a sports stadium thing, where there's a identity that the inhabitants own and they become very proud of. And I think the last one that I'll share is sort of Arctic regions up in the north and down at the poles. And again, this could be an interesting location for testing things on Earth in the most extreme places that we have on Earth, because anywhere we go off-world is going to be hostile climate, going to be very difficult to operate in. And I think we could at least get an approximation of how things are going to perform in extreme climates by testing them in these places. So we use the resources that we have on Earth to prepare us as best we can for other inhospitable climates. So got a nice little pan on that one going. So that's kind of the idea that we've been looking at, is how can I stand on your guys' shoulders and sort of create that vision, and how can we communicate that to the young people and get them excited about a career in space, but being able to live in a fantastic place as well, and trying to bring it all in as an integrated vision. So that's my bit done. Thank you.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much. And with his stuff, you saw where he took you from place to place. So, and Oscar Garcia is going to talk to us about point to point, which is the infrastructure that Francis was talking about in, between different airports or spaceports. And so Oscar, he is the chairman and CEO of InterFlight Global Corporation, and his company focuses on developing point to point with hypersonic, supersonic, suborbital, and there's the fourth one I can't remember, just like the seven dwarfs. So Oscar, take it away. Oh, we can't hear you.
Thank you, Izzy. And we want to finish on time, right at 5:30, my time, which is 6:30. I can
go ahead and go
quick.
a little. Yeah, go ahead and go a little over, because point to point is very important.
Yeah, I will just make a few comments. This panel was so complete that I just would like to make a couple of points in a couple of minutes. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, excellent. So the Fast Forward Group and High Speed Flight is a think tank that my firm has funded for the last 10 years. And we focus on the connectivity between spaceports, and the part of the commercial space transportation focus on the word transportation as in connecting through space spaceports on Earth. And we started this work a while ago. And we all know the space economy is pushing $500 billion. This group probably is very well versed about that. But just to summarize what was spoken here, and mentioning the 20-year inflection points that the space industry seems to have had, I'd like to take it one step back and talk about the multi-generational vision that we need to have in order to make the commercial space industry work. If you go back to the 60s and the Apollo program, the 80s and the Space Shuttle program, that's what I call Generation 1, the enablers of those two technologies. In 2020, we enter what I call Generation 2. All of us here on this panel are part of another inflection point in about 2004, when the world, and I happened to be in Mojave on September 29, 2004, and we watched something that had never been done before, which is 2 civilian pilots on a civilian-built spacecraft went to space and came back safely. That was about 20 years ago, and what has happened in the last 20 years, and all the efforts all of us have put together, all the spaceports that have been licensed, all the regulation that has been put in place and licensing, take us to where I call this next inflection point, 2023, 24. By the way, Elon Musk, as the first spaceship flight was taking place, was playing with rockets and blowing things up in the California desert quietly. But 20 years later, we find that we are at an inflection point where all the elements that are necessary to start considering transportation through space, but not to go to the moon or Mars or orbit on Leo, but to go somewhere using space as a frictionless medium to connect the world very quickly. We are there right now. I think the next 20 years is time to implement the vision that has been developed the last 20 years. So in the interest of time, let me just, to summarize a lot of what has been said today, let me share a video with you, if I can, that probably some of you have seen, and that reflects, in my view, the vision that, let me see if I can transfer this. Can you see this video?
We can, yes.
Perfect. So this is Elon Musk's vision of how spaceports will be connected in the next 20 years, and how transportation methods will go into using space and space trajectories to connect the world, and all the elements we discussed today, the education that David was talking about, the edge students graduating today are probably going to be the enablers in the next 2 decades of what you see on this video. And 20 years from now, our generation will leave the workplace, and that generation will take it to the next inflection point, Generation 3. So as a summary, I'd like to say that after 20 years in this industry, we need to focus on bringing not only master planning, but master generational planning to support what we are building today. Any impact, Scott, economic impact analysis, financial profit and loss, that ignores the fact that we are in a multi-decadal, multi-generational effort will probably not go very well. And that is a very heavy lift, but we have to do it together. So what you see here is SpaceX vision of how the world will connect anywhere to anywhere on Earth within 60 minutes. Now, to see this animation in real life is going to take probably 20 years. It's going to take our generation to Generation 3 that will enable something else. So I'd like to just finish up with that rather than go through a slide deck. I'd like to leave you with those thoughts. I think the spaceport infrastructure is in place. We have certainly the industry leadership, academic leadership, educational leadership. What I think the biggest challenge we are going to have is to be able to adopt a multi-generational approach in our policymakers, in our civil servants and leaders. And I know that is a very heavy lift, heavy call, but this effort is multi-decadal, multi-generational, and we are now on the verge of connecting spaceports with spacecraft and making use of space that will enable not a $500 billion industry, but well over $1 trillion industry, in addition to the $500 billion that we all talk about. So in my view, and as a conclusion, transportation of people and goods across Earth using space as a medium is probably the biggest surprise and the biggest economic reward for all of us and for all that support our efforts in the next 2 decades. So I'll leave it there. Is that so that we don't run out of time?
Well, and that's a very important point, is that you will be able to go anywhere in the world in an hour and a half max. So what's that going to do with cargo? What's that going to do with moving people and visiting and tourism? What's that going to do to our world? And if it takes us 20 years to create a general aviation airport, then we've got to plant those seeds for a spaceport very quickly. So yes, 20 years is going to
patient, persistent, and multi-generational. Some of our adversaries across the world have multi-generational perspectives. They get into projects with 100-year vision. And again, go back to the 60s with Apollo, the 80s with Shuttle, the 2000s with the space station, and now with commercial space. We have to have a 2100. The next 80 years, we have to justify translating capital formation into what we discuss here today. The biggest hurdle I see is the short-term political thinking of some of our decision makers and legislators. We need to pass through that stage. And Scott, you probably are one of the, and Arturo to an extent. I've been in some of your meetings, your public board meetings, and sometimes it's hard to believe the short-sightedness of some of our political leaders. So let's keep up the good work.
Well, and a point to that is that, okay, if you don't see the vision and you have other concerns that stop vertical launch or stop this particular technology from growing, then all you're doing is stopping that community. You're stopping that state from growing. That doesn't mean that it's going to stop it at all. China and Russia and a lot of the other people that aren't necessarily going to have the allies in their best interests, they're going to keep developing it, whether or not we do. So if we want to do it the right way, if we want to do it the positive way, we want to do it the ethical way, then we have to lead the way. So, and that's my message for that. So any questions that we have tonight before we give a huge thanks to the panel. And like I said, these are all stars. These are what I consider the cream of the crop in the spaceport industry, and I've been very honored that they have spent their evening with us. So any questions? All right, we will have this in a recording, and we will have the links to all of the speakers on the webpage, Space for Kentucky, and we will have if you look in the past meetings, you will have a whole page that's dedicated to this particular meeting, and look for that. And thank you for joining us tonight, and be sure to come to the Spaceport Summit in January. So I hope that you have found this evening enjoyable and inspirational, and I hope it has inspired you to reach for the stars.